Welcome back to English Up. I am Mohammed Nabil, and this is my series of videos to help teachers enhance their teaching skills. In the last video, we discussed the idea of taking risks and how important it is for a teacher to lower the affective filter so that the students want to take risks. Hand in hand with that thought, however, is the need for a learner to know the proper ways to take risks. In other words, helping students learn the correct language learner strategies will help give them more confidence, more motivation, and ultimately better language skills. While we said that the risk is good, not all risk is created equal. Let me tell you one more story. Francois Gwen, smart or foolish? That is the question we need to ask ourselves while listening to this story. Here are the facts. Francois Gwen lived at the end of the 19th century and was a Latin and Greek professor from France. Sound pretty smart so far, right? He also wrote books, and he was considered a predecessor of Charles Berlitz, who revolutionized language learning in his day. Perhaps Gwen's most famous book, The Art of Teaching Language, is something I think every language teacher should read, not only because of his ideas about language learning, but because of his experiences in trying to learn language himself. You see, just around 1880, Francois decided he wanted to learn German, so he left his teaching position for an entire year and moved to Hamburg, Germany. Good idea? Smart? I think so. He then spent the first 10 days doing what? Studying German in his room. He first learned 248 irregular German verbs, studied a grammar book, and he refused to leave until he had committed it all to his memory. Whoa! After 10 days, he left his room and finally tried to test out his knowledge. He went to the university and listened in on some classes. How do you think he did? Could he understand German? In fact, he phrases it like that. Not a word, not a single word would penetrate to my understanding. No, more than this. I didn't even distinguish one of the grammatical forms so newly studied. I didn't even recognize a single one of the irregular verbs freshly learned, though they certainly must have fallen in the crowds from the lips of the speaker. So Francois went back to his room and shut the door again for another 8 days. This time he memorized 800 German roots and committed to memory the grammar book and irregular verbs again, and off to the university again. Any guesses? Could he understand any word this time? Not a word. Now, we don't want to be too hard at poor Gwen at this point. We admit there are many things we should admire. He keeps trying. He never gives up. But he also keeps using the same strategy. Finally, the third time, he tries to change the strategy. So, what does he do now? Is it smart? Let me tell you what he does. He goes down to a shop below his room. He actually leaves the room and tries to talk with customers in the shop. He opens his mouth. He tries to say a few things. Unfortunately, they laughed at him. This makes things even worse. Poor sensitive Francois, a professor, a genius, looks silly, just like every one of us when learning a new language. Do you think as a professor of languages, he was used to looking ridiculous? I don't either. In fact, do you think it is possible that sometimes being smart is what makes you foolish? Food for thought. Anyway, the story ends rather tragically. Gwen, super embarrassed, returns to his room and tries translations. Doesn't work. Then he tries memorizing a book of dialogues. Nope, not that either. Then he spends a month memorizing 300,000 words in a dictionary. Nothing, not a word. After 1 year of effort, guess what? Francois goes home without learning German at all. Not a word. Now, what does this story illustrate? And what can we learn from it? It certainly re-emphasizes the idea that practice is an important part of language learning and that memorizing simply isn't enough. Sure, that's true. But it also illustrates another point that we would like to discuss together. First, everyone likes to look smart, and people like Francois Gwen, adult learners of a language, are accustomed to looking smart. They often choose language learning strategies that avoid looking foolish and taking risks. This is not to say that all of his strategies were bad, but rather that in the absence of risks, his strategies are likely to increase learning but not acquisition, which is our ultimate goal.